Welcome, everybody, back to the Dr. Nobody podcast. Today, I have a great guest, a friend of mine that I appreciate her so much. I've got to know her at my newest company I'm at, and we formed such a great relationship. I feel like we had the same mentality, especially when it comes down to innovation, which we'll talk about later. But I have Zina today as my guest. And Zina, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Hey, Dr. Nobody. So great to be with you today. Indeed, I think we hit it off really quickly. And I think that often happens when you have a good vibe with someone. And when that happens, particularly in the workplace, it really creates magic. So I was so very pleased to meet you, Dr. Nobody, and glad to be here. So yeah, my name's Zina Manji. I have a pharmacy background, which maybe we'll get into later. And I'm actually was born outside of the U.S. I came to the U.S. as an immigrant. So that's part of my story. And I went into healthcare, being interested in several different areas, and ended up going into regulatory affairs. It's a bit of a story there. And other interests I still have, and I'm trying to figure out how I weave those in my career stage now. So I have had 23 years in working in pharmaceutical regulatory affairs, supporting pharmaceutical companies, and now more recently I've joined a medical technology company, which is a smaller company than where I was, and focus on a whole different area of products, which is new, but it gives me an opportunity to test my entrepreneurial skills and my innovation skills. And really, at this point in my life, it's given me a chance to choose what I want to do and what I want to focus on. So a lot of things now, going back to the early part of my life and my career interests, are somewhat coming full circle and giving me another chance to look at my future in an entirely different way. So I'm really excited to be here with you, Dr. Nobody, and have a chat about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, no offense to my other guests, but I think you have the most incredible story to tell. Very excited. I told you that, pre-interview, it was just, I really want the guests, I want my listeners to hear about your story. And before we get into it, you said something that I just want to ask you about. What do you mean by full circle with everything going on?
Well, I'm learning a lot recently this year. This year, there's a lot happening in healthcare. And with that, I'm also looking at my personal trajectory and how will I show up in my profession, but also how I show up as myself and being authentic. So coming full circle, meaning initially you think that life is kind of linear. You go through school, you get the right grades, you study the right things, you go to the right colleges, and then you get a particular type of job. No pun intended, but that's kind of old school now, I believe. Very old school thinking. And really, I think as we see healthcare innovation, if I focus on that area, but really it goes to many different industries, things are exponentially changing. And we're coming to a point where life is going to be very different than what it had ever been before. So when it comes full circle, it's almost as if, my time and my interests, periods of time in my life are kind of folding back over at this point where now opportunities I thought were gone, interests that I thought, well, I didn't take that turn. And maybe I took a wrong turn at Albuquerque, but maybe now actually there's another way to weave it back in. And so kind of this reinvention I'm going through and actually permitting myself to go through reinvention is really looking back at, well, what was I really interested in? Who as a person, but also what value do I want to contribute in my profession, but even through me as a person. So I've been doing a lot of reflection on this, and it's a work in progress. But I believe that with the pace of change, this is an opportunity to go back to what was originally interesting to me. And maybe those opportunities are actually not gone, and they can be weaved back in.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that's a interesting perspective to see, especially with how much experience you have. And I know you're talking about, your life. Let's talk about that, because this is why, I do this podcast, is so that my guests can tell their stories. And I think your story is so unique. I think once you tell your story and then we go into your career, everything you just said will make more sense to the listeners and be like, okay, now this is something to look forward to. I mean, that sounds exciting. So I would tell you to start really, from the beginning, which essentially is your beginning when you're really young. So why don't you start from there and tell us how, everything happened, how you came to America?
Sure. And as you reflect on your career and you go back, a lot more impacts us and what decisions we made based on where we came from, how we grew up, what was the context of our growing up and our upbringing, that forms and kind of conditions ourselves. And I'm realizing now some of that impact, positive and negative. So really, yeah. So good to go back and kind of think about the past and where you come from. So I am of Indian descent. So my grandparents were born in India, and they moved to Uganda, which is in East Africa, when they were teenagers. So my parents were born and raised in Uganda, and I was born there. And a short while later, the government was overthrown, or there was a new president, but came in. Uganda became independent. It used to be a British protectorate. It became independent, and then there was Idi Amin, who came in, which some people may have heard about him, and pretty much took over the government as a dictator, and overnight said that all Southeast Asian and others had to leave the country within 90 days. So in that time, my parents were they're around 27 years old, I think. And so very young to actually have to go through this turmoil. And both of them had gone through British schooling. So they were very well placed to resettle in the Western world, which was great for us. A lot of my relatives went to England because they still had their British passports. They hadn't become Ugandan citizens. And recently, actually in 2022, was the 50th year of this expulsion from Uganda. So a lot has been, published, a lot of videos, a lot of reflections from people who left and who remember things. And so last year was a pretty big year and milestone of that event. So we came to the U.S. as refugees. So it was me and my parents. And because of my parents' success in the British school system, we were, I think, chosen as being likely to be successful to resettle in the U.S. And a Christian church in the state of Iowa sponsored us. So we came straight to Iowa, landed at JFK, switched planes, came to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And it ended up being, I think, although culturally isolating initially, it was, I think, a very good thing that happened. Because for me, now having grown up in the U.S. and made my life in the U.S. and so have my parents, my sister was born in the U.S., And this grounding in Iowa and the neighborhood and culture we were in was very solid. And if you think of old time US, say like the Andy Griffith Show and Little Town of Maybury and all of those things, that classic Americana, I was able to experience that firsthand in this little microcosm where maybe, nationally it was going away. But in this little neighborhood, it still kind of existed. So next door to us was an old couple from the South. And, pretty much very, very Mayberry-like, right? And so he had a guitar, he'd come on the front porch, and we all had front porches there, and he'd come over in the evening, play his guitar. I mean, it's amazing. I remember all this, and it's like, that was nostalgic, and having that experience. We had the milkman come and deliver milk at the front door for a little while, and then that stopped. But I was right at maybe the tail end of being able to experience some of those classic Americana culture things that you see in these very, very old black and white shows. So it was a very, very good upbringing, and very safe, very free. Being a kid, I never felt like I was different. Somehow I never experienced racism. Or maybe I didn't know it. But, it was a very comfortable upbringing. Actually, I've never experienced it. Now, again, maybe I'm not sensitized to it. Maybe it has been there, but I haven't been aware of it. So interestingly, being an immigrant from Uganda, being of Indian descent from India, I'm not white. My dad is very fair. My sister is very fair, but I am definitely more olive skinned. So, and so is my mom. So I go on my mom's side, not dark, but olive skinned, I would say. And so it's interesting that I never really felt that I was different. Iowa had a really good education system. And so I went all through school, preschool, all the way through high school and into university, completed my 3 pharmacy degrees there, undergraduate and graduate, and really gave me some solid footing, including my time at the University of Iowa College of Pharmacy as well. And my professor there took me under her wing and taught me about research. It's not something I ever considered. So you just thought you go to school, you get a job. That's it. It wasn't about a career. It was you go to school, you become like most immigrants, the expectation was doctor, lawyer, engineer, right? Get something solid so you're financially stable, you're secure. That was the main thing. My parents never pressured me on anything, but I think this was kind of the unsaid expectation and what expectation I had for myself. So I was never thinking in terms of career. That came later. So that's kind of the early part of my life, and how I then, after that, started getting into starting my career, moving from Iowa to New Jersey, the mecca of pharmaceutical companies, when I decided to go into industry.
I wrote down because I have a friend in Iowa too, and we make fun of him because he went from New Jersey to Iowa. Now, my question to you is, did you get to choose, did you choose Iowa or they gave you Iowa? Because that is just like a middle of nowhere cornfield style, country right there.
Yeah, we didn't choose. My dad had applied to all embassies in the world who were taking refugees. And U.S. responded within 3 days, where many other refugees were still in the refugee camps in Italy. That's where we were placed. So we were in Italy for 3 days in the refugee camp there, I think near Naples. It was all part of an airlift operation sponsored by the United Nations to get us all out. Imagine this all happened within 90 days during the expulsion from Uganda. So we were just told where to go. So there's a specific church in Marion, Iowa, who was part of this organization, who was taking refugees, not only from Uganda, but I think there was a Vietnamese family as well that they were also resettling at the same time as my family. So we came straight to Iowa because you have to be sponsored. So we were sponsored, and the community there was wonderful. So the church community helped us to find an apartment, helped my parents to find jobs. I went to daycare there in Marion, Iowa. I still remember. I felt it was pretty seamless. I was I just turned 3 years old. So I don't remember a whole lot, but I remember some scenes and some few things. And even though we're Muslim, we were going to church and participating. I went to Sunday school. And of course, being Muslim, we believe in all the prophets of Judaism and Judeo-Christian tradition. Is all part of the Islamic background as well. And so it was never a big deal that we were going to church because it was part of what we call people of the book, the three traditions. And it was a very nice community. As I grew older, I became more aware of myself being Muslim and also more aware of myself, speaking different language. So when I was younger, it was all just seamless. You don't really think it's different. Yeah, you speak this here and you speak that over there, right? So I didn't know a word of English when I arrived. So my mom went with me. Initially, I have no memory of this, but she went with me and I was playing with the kids and she'd translate for me.
That's cute.
So initially I had no idea what was going on. I got lost in a mall once, which was open mall at that point in time. It was a plaza. It became a closed mall. I got lost there. I don't remember this. But I didn't speak a word of English. Somehow I knew where the car was parked. It was in front there by the store that my mom was in, which was there. And so so I went and stood by the car. A lady came by. I'm speaking Swahili and I'm speaking these Indian languages all mixed up together. She has no idea what I'm saying. But she waited with me and my parents, found me. I guess I was not too far from the store. So luckily. So that was somehow then it became, okay, let's speak more English. And so I learned English pretty quickly going through preschool and then all along through school. So at some point then I realized, okay, this is, different culture at school, different culture at home. But it was pretty seamless. My parents never made it very strict. They never made this kind of draconian, don't do this, don't do that. We don't do this and they do that. There was never that sort of thing, right? It was all pretty much mixed in because they were also making friends and they were also going to work and, getting to know people. And so they were probably, actually, I've never talked to them about this, but they were probably going through their own kind of assimilation and, community forming. So it was all pretty seamless. I gotta take my hat off to my parents now because I see a lot of other immigrants worried that their kids are going to forget their culture and everything and say, no, we can't have a Christmas tree and we can't do this and we can't do that. That never came up in my house. We always had a Christmas tree, and we, celebrated everything. As more Indians came in directly from India, there was a whole other immigration, but that was by choice. They weren't refugees. There was then an Indian community that formed in Iowa, and I picked up the other Indian languages, just speaking around them. But we also celebrated the Indian holidays as well. So Hindu holidays, Christian, Muslim, everything. It was all kind of very seamless. So I never felt I was really different until I grew older. And I would say really until I got into college, into university. And that was, again, I think more by choice, not by feeling that I was different or somehow had to assimilate to be accepted. It was probably there in the underlying things. Maybe I'm not aware of it at this point. Maybe something to think about. But when I came into university, I wanted to go back to my roots. So I used to be called Tina when I was growing up. And my full name is Zina Tara. So when I entered university, I said, no, my name's Zina. So at least it's close to my full name, my given name, and things like that. So slowly I've kind of integrated, I've made my life more authentic towards my culture and who I am.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. Oh, you're going to say?
Yeah, so it wasn't a choice to go to Iowa, but I think it ended up being pretty good. I think the impressions of Iowa are probably, those stereotypical aspects. Maybe it depends where you go in Iowa. I think we were lucky to be in eastern Iowa, which was more cosmopolitan, large teaching hospital, big university. It's a Big Ten school, University of Iowa, Iowa State University as well. That's on the other side of Iowa, however. And a lot of industry, big companies. So it attracted a lot of people from all over the world eventually. So it became quite cosmopolitan, especially in Iowa City when I eventually went there, which was not too far from Cedar Rapids anyway. So it was actually quite diverse at that time. Slowly became diverse.
Yeah, I mean that's what my understanding now is for my friend. He goes to University of Iowa. So let's talk about your university experience and how did you decide? First off, how was that transition to go to university, and then what did you do in university in terms of deciding to eventually go to pharmacy school, or did you do a program that did it all?
It's a great question. So I never thought about pharmacy. Afterwards, like generations just behind me or classes just behind me, there was a lot more like people who had come from India. A lot of women especially would go become pharmacists, which was interesting. And now there are a lot of women pharmacists. But at that time, since they were behind me, I was never really exposed to that whole group of Indians who were saying, okay, they're going to pharmacy school, because I was living in a small town in Iowa for high school in Mount Vernon, Iowa, and which is also an excellent school system. So there weren't a lot of Indians there, but just 30 miles over, there was Iowa City, which had a lot of Indians. So it never occurred to me to go to pharmacy school. All through elementary and middle school, I would say middle school, not elementary school, I was thinking about being a doctor. So yeah, now I'm remembering in middle school too, I had interest in medicine. I'm not sure why. I don't know why I thought about medicine, but also at one point I wanted to be a lawyer. So I thought about law. Maybe it's watching TV, and that's probably where it came from. And trying to choose a profession. So there was this thing. Although I didn't feel pressure, I guess there's an underlying expectation you choose a profession. So I thought about law early on, but as I got into high school, I pretty much thought, okay, I'll go to university and I'll enter pre-med. Now that's as far as my thinking went. I didn't think about what would I do being a doctor? What does being a doctor mean? Now that I'm speaking to you, I'm realizing I never really thought that through.
It's okay.
I also was interested in diplomacy, which is part of what I was talking about earlier, is that, life coming back 360. So I was also, what I really wanted to do, kind of excitement wise, although it's probably not quite exciting in real life, was I wanted to work for the State Department, be a diplomat.
Fancy.
And, I was always interested in politics and geopolitics. I always followed politics all through from, I don't remember the Ford administration, but I do remember Carter. And so my interest started very young, maybe watching with my dad. And so I remember things. So, that got me interested in politics, got me interested in geopolitics, although not so much geo at that time. I was still focused more on U.S. So I wanted to be a U.S. diplomat, right? So I never really thought about what it meant, what profession to choose. So it was just something to do. I didn't really look at a lot of schools. The tuition was always a concern. We had gone through the 80s recession, and it was pretty tough times. Like everyone, I think that was a hard time for a lot of families. So my parents were pretty good. They didn't really, share or make me feel the pressures that they were probably under at that time. But I knew that it was important to be cautious in terms of how much you would spend and how much you could afford in terms of university. So I just went to the University of Iowa. Not really. I think it was a good school, and why go anywhere else? And I didn't really think about going anywhere else. I'm not sure why I didn't think about going anywhere else. A lot of people were going to the University of Iowa, so I think I just did the same. So my experience there was pretty good, actually. Made a lot of friends and was able to live on campus in the dorms initially, and then not too far from campus in an apartment. It was a pretty good time. It was a pretty good time, I have to say. Walkable, everything was walkable, or take a campus bus. So it was not pressured on, running or driving or anything like that. It was all pretty much, everything was pretty much close by. So it was a pretty good time. So I was able to focus on my studies, but what was tough was I also worked while I was going through university, not undergrad, but probably in the latter part of undergrad, I was working a lot at the hospital as a pharmacy intern once I went into pharmacy after deciding pre-med wasn't going to work for me. Maybe we can talk about that. So yeah, it was pretty, I guess you asked about what it was like. I guess I didn't really think about it. I just went with the flow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So why don't you talk about, because that was my follow-up question is, so you did your university, and then did you go to pharmacy school immediately, and how did you end up deciding pharmacy school?
So when I was in the dorms and, talking with all my friends and, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And I'm in pre-med, and I'm kind of thinking, well, what is life going to be like as a doctor? I had the impression that I wouldn't be able to have control of my time. So I felt that it was too much of a sacrifice in terms of time to be a doctor. The years of residency and all of that, but even once you're in practice, I had the impression that it was just going to be way too intense of a profession for me to have a full balanced life in the way that I thought I wanted, although not fully thought out, but I just didn't think that that was going to be the right thing for me. So I went into pharmacy, having met other pharmacy students who actually chose to do the same thing. And I actually never thought about pharmacy. I thought, wow, well, this is kind of interesting. And I did like it. And that was the right fit for me. Learning about drug therapy and all of that, and being part of the healthcare team to even advise the physician, because it is difficult to know all of the drug therapies and all that's possible. So there's a lot of value that pharmacists can add as part of the healthcare team. And when I was working at the hospital, I got to do rounds with doctors and nurses and everyone else as an intern, and reviewing charts and such, and being part of that advisory group to be part of giving the input on what would be the optimal healthcare choices or treatment choices for any particular patient. So really looking at it, learning it on an individual basis, which actually now I'm realizing that that's really what is my main interest now, is on individuals, which we can talk about. So pretty much I think it was more about having a balanced life, but also still being able to provide something of value, focused, but of value and importance, and something that I felt like I could do.
When people think of pharmacy and pharmacy school, they think most people become a pharmacist. Now, I don't think you became a pharmacist. You discovered regulatory affairs. Is that when you discovered it, or there was something that happened in between there that I'm missing?
Yeah, isn't this interesting? I mean, my life is kind of serendipity. It's a story of serendipity. If I was in a different state and met different people, maybe I'd be completely on a different track. I guess that's maybe true of a lot of people. Mm-hmm. But so same reason I wasn't interested in being like a retail pharmacist. I didn't want to work shifts. And I felt like there was something more that I could do. So I didn't become a retail pharmacist, and I didn't become a hospital pharmacist either. I did get licensed, however. So I am, and I keep it up to date. So I'm still a registered pharmacist, but only in Iowa. And I don't practice pharmacy, as you say. So what did I think I was going to do after I graduated and have these three now pharmacy degrees? So I started with the bachelor's of pharmacy, and I got licensed at that time and passed the boards. Then I went to get a PharmD degree. At that time, they didn't have the entry-level PharmD degree. Now, most pharmacy schools, maybe all, that you enter, you come out with the PharmD degree. There's no bachelor's of pharmacy degrees, I think, now. But at that time, it was a 2-year add-on. And it was, I think my class might have been the last class to have the 2-year add-on. And then I still was not satisfied. And so in parallel of doing the PharmD degree, I discovered research with one of my professors and thought, you know what, let me do a master's degree. So I did a master's in clinical pharmacy with that professor. And that opened up my eyes to research. which I never had considered. So I was a career student for a while, trying to kind of find my way. I started getting interested in, well, maybe I should do a master's in public health. So if you kind of see, there's these other elements coming in, law in terms of, regulations, policy, diplomacy. If I was interested in Masters of Public Health, which I actually didn't go forward with, but that was an interest of mine as I came out with the Masters in Clinical Pharmacy and thinking I would do some research. So in doing research, you often have to consider health policies. So then I was trying to figure out what to do. And again, I wasn't really stressed out about it. The opportunities, I became more stressed later in my career, actually, about having a role. But this time when I was exploring, for some reason, I wasn't that stressed out, even though I didn't have a large salary. I was working at the hospital, but that did enough. But it's definitely not something that can support your life. So I decided I had the opportunity to go to industry. So I came to SmithKline Beecham in New Jersey. So I came to New Jersey and I entered into a pharmaceutical company as an intern and as a research intern. And when I did that, I realized that there's such a thing as regulatory affairs, which interested me because in school I was looking at drug information as part of my graduate work. My graduate job, not part of my graduate degree, but I was getting paid to work in drug information. I was looking at all these new drug approvals. And I was looking at those new drug approvals. I was seeing all these different areas of what FDA reviews, biopharmaceutics, clinical overviews, medical overviews, etc., and labeling and administrative information as well. And all of the information back and forth, and it would be redacted, so you wouldn't be able to see everything. But the FDA reviews that were not redacted, you could see. So I became aware of what do FDA reviewers consider when they're reviewing drug applications. So when I actually then came to industry rotation in New Jersey, I realized that that's actually regulatory affairs. So it's the regulatory affairs departments in these companies who submit that package that ultimately FDA reviewers review. And I realized, okay, that's what I want to do. Because when I was doing the drug information overviews as part of summarizing drug information, I really enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. Nobody else did. So no. It was a new area that they were looking for drug information to summarize for. It was a fee for service outfit that we were working on at the University of Iowa as part of the University of Iowa, and so I was doing that and summarizing. It was provided to subscribers, so they would be able to see a quick summary of drug information, and part of that was this summary of what FDA had put out. So nobody else was really interested in doing that. So it's kind of a new area to test. Is this a value for subscribers to look at these drug information packages for information that maybe is not published? That was the thinking at that time. So I realized I enjoyed it. Nobody else enjoyed it. So I realized that this is actually a niche area, so to speak, in terms of interest. And when I entered into industry, I realized this was called regulatory affairs, and I decided, okay, that's the job I'm going for. And luckily, I was able to enter after my internship I was able to enter and get my first role in regulatory affairs 6 months after I started my internship, about 6 months. So I'm 23 years later, still doing regulatory affairs. Yeah.
So in 1 to 2 sentences, tell the listeners what regulatory affairs is. How would you define it?
I would define it as creating the regulatory strategy and pulling together submission packages, data packages to help that align with the rules that FDA puts out so that safe and effective evidence is provided for FDA review so that products can get approved and get onto the market. And regulatory affairs is the role that pulls all that together from all the different functions, medical, development, all the scientists, all the product development information, production information, labeling, etc., pulls it all together into a submission package, ensures that it meets the requirements that FDA is asking for that particular type of product so that it is adequate, and advises the company on the value of the package and manages delivery of that approval from FDA to the company.
I only ask because you are the first guest that's regulatory affairs. So when I bring someone new like that, I'd like the listeners to hear what that role is, because they are listening because they like the diversity in jobs I try to bring on here. So anybody who's ever been interested in this or first time hearing about it, they have now a working definition. They can look it up and maybe see that's what a right fit for them it is. For me personally, that's why I said no before. Definitely not the right fit for me. And I think you definitely need a different mindset. And my mindset wasn't there when I learned about it. I almost feel like it's, like you said, the rules and laws that the FDA have bestowed upon all these companies to get these products out. But in terms of 23 years, that number that you're talking about of your regulatory experience, how has the 23 years that you've done regulatory affairs have been? What advice would you give someone who's just starting out and hearing this and be like, man, I can't imagine being at a company for 20 plus years?
Yeah, so I think 23 years is probably unusual, especially this day and age. Actually, there were several what we call lifers, jokingly call them lifers. Many of the generation of folks ahead of me, older than me, that were coming through my company, they had also been there for many years, actually. So it was not that unusual, right? But I think now it is more unusual. And I would say in the 23 years, anytime I was feeling a bit bored or feeling kind of stagnant, I got a new opportunity. I got a promotion, or I was able to then move to a different group. So I worked on global regulatory affairs for a long time. And then I moved around in global regulatory affairs. So I worked with different people and worked with different products. And there was always different challenges coming my way. So it was never the same thing. And also during that time, we did joint ventures with other companies, other different types of products came in. There was leadership changes, there were structure changes, there were changes in the group. So many times I almost had to pitch for my role again. And in a couple of cases, I did have to interview again or interview for a promotion. So it was never the same. So it was very dynamic. So the 23 years were very dynamic, I would say. And anytime I thought about, like I said, I was bored or something, I got a new opportunity. So there was no reason to leave. And actually, I think I benefited from staying in the same company because I could see how things were changing. I could see, what was done before on the product a while ago, what changed up to now. And having that firsthand knowledge is actually quite profound. Otherwise, when you're moving from company to company, you don't have that firsthand knowledge of what actually happened in the regulatory history of a particular product. Now, that may or may not be of interest, but when, maybe that particular product history may not be so much of interest. However, what you learn from that is, having learned that history on one or two or three products, you can go to any company and step into the middle of a product's life cycle or product history. And you have that understanding because you know firsthand what happens on other products. So then you can apply that knowledge when you're coming in midstream with a product you've never worked on before. You have some knowledge. And whereas if you moved around a lot, you may not understand that as much. So I think that was a benefit. But also kind of had to adapt and be agile as the company was changing. So as I said, there wasn't a reason to leave. And I kept having opportunity. It wasn't that I didn't think about leaving, but then why leave if I was having an opportunity and the opportunity was better than anything else that I saw that was in front of me at that particular time. Of course, now the benefit is, having stayed there for 23 years, I was able to take company retirement.
Best advice.
And that has given me freedom. And I'm not retirement age, but it's given me now financial freedom to an extent, and healthcare freedom, where now I could choose what I want to do and lead it based on my passion, not based on just having a job. Not that that's what I was doing, but I had more freedom of choice now. And so I think that's a benefit that, where maybe I would have gotten much more variety of experience if I had moved around to different companies. But I think I did benefit from the longevity of learning and interacting with people and going through how you navigate through company challenges. Whereas now in different companies, that wouldn't bother me because I've already gone through it. I have that experience of surviving company changes. I know how to navigate that and not be fearful of that, and look for another opportunity in the same company, or adapt my role such that it becomes more niche or more something I'm working on something nobody else is. So then my value is more. I'm not going to lose my role because I'm working on something nobody else is working on. And I chose to do that. So I learned some secrets about how to stay, how to survive, even though many times I felt like I had reached my ninth life, but, I had gone through. And now, of course, I say company retirement because I'm not actually retired. So I was able to, let's say, bank on that and give myself freedom now to really focus on innovation. So the last 7 years of my 23 years, I created a whole new area. I followed my passion. So that would be advice I would give, regardless of what company you're in. Follow your passion. Take that opportunistic mindset. If something's in front of you, take advantage of it. And take the time to learn. It doesn't even mean you have to actually have the role. Learn about it. Try to shadow somebody. Try to do what we call a secondment, or a research role or something. Learn about it, even if the role is not available for you. the more you know about it, once you're actually doing it, you'll automatically get that role because people will see you, oh, well, you already have knowledge about it. You're already doing it. And such that you have to go to another company to get that job, you can speak about it in a authoritative way, in an experienced way. So even if you don't actually have that role or have had that role, you can talk about it from an experienced learning aspect where maybe you're likely to actually get that role. Because I think a lot of companies now look for, are you fit for the team? How can you adapt? How can you be agile? How can you be creative? And with that type of story, you can actually say, yeah, I not just followed my passion. I looked at what is important to me. What do I want to accomplish in my life? And why this area is something that I want to learn. So I did that in the last 7 years. And that's a long time, 7 years. But again, it was somewhat serendipitous. So it's only the last 3 years, I would say, I was very intentional. And this is the advice I would give other people. Don't wait, 16 plus years to become intentional in, in what you want to do. Do it right from the start. The more clear you are about what you want to do and what you want to accomplish, what you want to be known for, the more authentic it is that you can direct your career and have not just the career, but the type of lifestyle and the type of personal life you want to have. And that's the advice I would give to people now is, it's not about the 23 years, although if that works for you, there's nothing wrong with that because it certainly worked for me. And there's a lot of benefit I got from that. And I learned a whole new area because I had an interest in it. And I did that for the last 7 years. And for the last 3 years, I was very strategic about it. So, I took classes, I got certificates in innovation. So I really focused on innovation more and what that meant. And as a regulatory professional, I felt like I had to learn the business. So I took business school classes and things, focused on innovation so that I could actually speak about it and pitch and talk to my commercial colleagues and my R&D colleagues that I think you should look at it this way because from a regulatory perspective, this is going to give you the best case and this is why. And I really love that. I love that part of it. So you see the diplomacy comes in. The negotiation comes in from my past interest in wanting to be a diplomat. I'm playing lawyer because regulatory affairs, you have to look at rules, you have to be aware of legislations. So it's kind of like being a lawyer, although I'm not a lawyer. But it gets that interest. And then I wanted to go into medicine, so I'm in healthcare. I understand the science because of my background. So I was able to weave all of that in together. And now in the role I'm in now, and in what I want to do for the future, that's all coming together and now in a much more intentional, targeted way. But that's why I say things have now coming full circle.
Yeah, that's actually the last topic I want to cover, which is actually the next one. About your current role and innovation. But before we move on to that, just really quickly, thinking about your 23 years of experience, what would you say is your one crowning achievement or moment that you've had in those 23 years?
Okay, let me think about that.
It could be a launch. It could be, something you produced, something you helped with.
I think, there was an FDA registration we achieved. We didn't actually get it to launch, but it's the one standout project that I got to work with several different agencies in the government, not just FDA. And I was the lead for the project. I got to work with the pharma side of the company, along with consumer healthcare, which is what my focus was. So it was several different areas of the company working together in collaboration, and I got to lead that project. And I had to lead the meetings with FDA in a completely new area. So negotiating with the FDA, but I would say negotiating, I mean trying to understand what FDA's concerns were and trying to address those concerns. And that's what I mean by negotiation. And trying to then get the data that FDA was then asking for and ensuring that it was the proper level of data to get the claims that we needed and to actually provide something that would be useful. So it was an innovative, crowning achievement from a regulatory perspective, but also in an emerging area, working with different areas of the government and with different teams internally. It was, partly a very high visible project in the company, and having achieved the regulatory registration was, I think, a crowning achievement, because it wasn't a commercial success. We didn't actually launch it, and that was for good reason. It was available. It's just the business case was not there. However, it's still a registration that some ex-FDA folks have told me that it was a big deal. And so that was good to know, because it was something transformative and a different type of product altogether. So what that project did, and why that's a crowning achievement, I would say, is because it gave me confidence to think different. It gave me confidence to challenge. It gave me confidence to know that I could lead, be the regulatory lead representing the company on a very highly visible project, and that I could work on it with calmness, but with a lot of interest. And there, on that particular project, definitely came in all the areas of diplomacy, medicine, science, law, legislation, because it was working around a whole new legislative area. So I would say that project.
Nice. Came full circle in its own unique way. So that's good. In the last topic that I'll ask you before I go to the two questions I always ask my guests, what is your current role and how does innovation play a role into it?
So my current role is still in regulatory affairs. I am leading in a role in a medical technology company, and I'm working on diagnostics. And this is a whole new area, as we saw coming out of the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. And although folks are much more comfortable or used to using at-home diagnostics now, I had been looking at this even before the pandemic and interested in learning about it and researching it. And the innovative area now is, how do you improve the diagnostics going forward? What are other diagnostics that would be helpful to help healthcare professionals and consumers to know that identifying the disease that they may have and helping to prevent with early treatment something that may be starting from getting worse. And so this really helps to further my purpose, which is to create regulatory strategies to enable meaningful innovations that help people live well. And that really helps with achieving that purpose and working in a focused area. And problems need to be solved. Let's do what we can to solve that problem. So very much research-based, but also trying to bring something to the market that's going to be useful.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I mean, you talk about innovation. That's kind of why we hit it off. I love innovation. Everybody has different definitions for innovation, but I think you and I had very similar ideas of innovation or emerging science innovations. And I think with everything changing, especially with the buzzword AI, I think it's important to embrace these innovations, especially like AI. It's helping us get there faster. To help people more. I mean, I know it's probably your goal, like mine, is just to help more people and get them, be proactive about treatments, because I think that's a big gap. I know for what I've heard with kids like mine, they can get tested for like different respiratory viruses like RSV, but they won't know for like a week. Why is there such a lag? That a week for a child with a type of virus like that is lethal. It could end up poorly. So, I think, love to talk more about it and hear more about it. But so, Zina, as we transition to these last two questions, I want to thank you again for sharing your amazing story and your background. And I think these questions are also designed when I give it to the guests to really summarize themselves for our listeners, and also it goes on the website because I think it's pretty cool. So the first one is, what are your best and worst moments in your life or your career?
So I'll start off, I think, with the worst moment. So while I was in school, and this would be undergraduate school, I was working. There's just way too much going on. I was exhausted, and I was struggling keeping up with the full workload, class load. And I think I was my own worst enemy at that point because I took too much on, thinking I could do everything. But the worst moment was it was not going well, and I had to drop, I think, 2, maybe 3 courses midway through, so that it wouldn't so that I could retake them. So that was a worse moment. That was a hard decision. It ended up being the best decision because then I was able to succeed and I was able to focus. But that was a very difficult moment because it meant I was going to take a little longer to complete and not complete at the same time as my classmates. So I realized that actually wasn't that bad because everyone was kind of doing their own thing, and where a big group of people would graduate together, it was not uncommon that you would have some that would do on their own time. So at the end of the day, it was not that bad, but that was a very, very, I think, difficult time because I felt like I may not make it. And I didn't know that I could actually drop those classes.
And then your best?
I think the best moment is partly what I described before professionally on the achievement of that registration that I spoke about earlier. That was a pretty defining moment, I would say. But the other best moment, I would say, is, and keeping to the professional side, was getting the role in innovation that I did. And that role opened up my eyes to a whole new area of career, of being more entrepreneurial minded. And what does innovation mean? As you say, there's definitely different definitions, but defining it for myself and for how I wanted to show up as a contributor to innovation, as a lead for regulatory strategy and innovation. What does that mean? That role helped me to build my own definition and my own strategy of how I was going to be a regulatory professional in an area that nobody else was doing because by definition, it was new. So I think this was the best moment that I was able to take advantage of that opportunity, of that gap, and take that on, as opposed to competing in an area that a lot of people are in. So let me do something new, which is scary because you've got to get it right. You don't know what the regulations are because in many cases the regulations aren't written. So you have to talk to a lot of people and you have to network. And this was the best point of my life because it got me outside of my company and it really stretched my networking skills, but it got me outside. I have met so many different people, and when you talk to people that are outside of your immediate world, you get a whole different perspective of what people appreciate and what the needs are and how you can contribute. And you meet other people and you get ideas about what they're doing and how maybe those things can help you. So I think that's been the best moment. I wouldn't be where I am now, which I'm very happy where I am now. And I'm very happy and excited about where I can go, where I can create whole different avenues going forward. None of that would have happened if I hadn't gotten that innovation role and really took it on to create my own space.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing. Here we go. Last question. What are 5 essential things you think you need to succeed in your life or your career?
So going back full circle, as I was talking about in the beginning, I think what I'm realizing, what you really need is confidence in yourself and who you are, knowing what you want. And along with that, self-esteem. If you have a strong sense of self-esteem and a strong sense of who you are with your authentic self, you can do anything. You can overcome so many adversities. So I think those 2 things to start with. I think having an open mind. Oftentimes we'll restrict ourselves and think about, okay, this is just the way it's to be and I'm in a box. That doesn't have to be. You create your own restrictions. You're creating that box. That box is self-imposed. So think outside the box, but not just in the buzzword way. But I mean, don't create that box. Don't box yourself in. That's what I mean by having an open mind. I think that's 3. Number 4, I would say, be healthy. Having good mental health and good physical health is really important. That can help you have good energy where you can achieve many things. It'll also put you in a positive mindset. It'll also help you to manage stress. So I don't mean by you have to be an athlete and all of that, but be mindful of your health. Pay attention to it because it will make you much happier in terms of you'll have the strength and positive mindset to deal with stress and to look for opportunities where if you are not healthy, you might be in a more negative mindset and your mind will be closed to opportunities that are in front of you. Number 5, I think, would be don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something. If you have an interest and you want to achieve, listen to yourself, because you are in your own way if you listen to other people. So go with what's in your heart, and if you really think you can achieve something and you want to achieve it, do it. If it's something you've never learned before, learn it. Because you have that interest, you will be able to learn it. So don't have a restrictive mindset that way, but don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something.
Yeah, totally 100,000% support that last one, especially because that's actually what got me into research, because my first professor who I did research with, I was very into AIDS studies and the virus and learning about it because it was still very unknown. And I was like, I'm going to do my PhD in viral studies, specifically in HIV and AIDS. And he goes, don't do that. He goes, you're wasting your time. Everyone else is doing that. And I was like, oh, wow. So it really threw me back. But not that I did do my studies in HIV and AIDS, but I did, do virology, immunology in my PhD. So I still specialized in that, which I was like, yeah, so with you on that last one, Zina. Obviously, I love the other ones as well. But thank you so much for sharing, your incredible story and your background, your wonderful journey to, regulatory affairs, and now your innovation role, which is very cool. I get the benefit when I do these is to listen to the podcast episode 2 more times, because I have to edit it and then make sure for a third time is good. So I'm looking forward to hearing it 2 more times. I hope the listeners are also going to enjoy it as many times as they like to listen to. But Zina, is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap it up here?
Yeah, I think for anyone who's, starting off, or even in the middle of things, or even at, more mature in your career, I think, I think everything's possible. I really do. I'm finding that now that I had created so many restrictions for myself, that if I had not done that, there's so many other things I could have done. So I think we talked about innovation. The pace of the world is going to be changing with AI. It's so many tools and so many opportunities. Embrace those changes. Make them your own. Take the opportunities and keep learning and be engaged, and follow where you want to go and what you want to do. Have that single-minded focus. And I think you will be able to achieve and be happy in the way that you want. Yeah.
Very wise words. I'll try to quote that for you so I can put it on the website. But thank you for sharing those. And everyone, I hope you gained plenty of insights today. This is the beginning of becoming a someone, but specifically the someone you always wanted to be. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please do give me a like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also visit my website, thedrnobodypodcast.com, to learn more about my guests and listen to the episode again, share this episode, and much more. Thanks again for listening to Season 2 of the Dr. Nobody Podcast, where we continue to turn nobodies to somebody. Talk to you all very soon.